Hi guys, hola, konnichiwa, guten tag, greetings from Canada. Hopefully this cookie decorating tutorial will inspire you to become more creative using less cookie making supplies. In this video you'll learn how to make 4 different styles of roses using royal icing. If you're interested in watching me decorate without voiceover or captions and just listening to relaxing music, please click here to watch my original video. For the classic rose, I'm starting by outlining the leaves with a slightly thicker consistency icing. Then I create organic shapes for the petals. You'll notice I am leaving parts of the cookie bare for now. This is so the more wet and thinner consistency icing I will add later doesn't run too much. Now I'm basically filling in the blanks with what we call flood icing, which is a thinner consistency icing, like honey. If you're interested in the recipe for the sugar cookies or icing, please leave me a comment below. Once the cookie has dried overnight, I'm filling in the gaps with icing to give it a bit more dimension. Dark food coloring continues to develop. If I were to make this design again, I would probably use a little bit less red color. The modern rose is a really fun one to make. This design uses the wet on wet technique, where you add icing of different colors to each other while they're still wet, and they melt into each other without bleeding or becoming blurry. Starting with a blob of flood consistency icing, I'm using a food-safe paintbrush to pull the icing closer to the edges of the cookie. It starts to settle into a nice even surface within about 15 seconds. Then it's a similar application for the leaves. The red and green icing can meet without too much concern for color bleeding. Using a darker red flood icing, start to pipe on the outline of the rose petals. One of the nice things about designs with curves or organic shapes is that you don't need to worry too much about a steady hand. I added a few white lines to give a bit of dimension to the leaves, but I also think you could leave them solid green and they would look just as cool, and you can tell that it's supposed to be a rose. The dimensional rose cookie uses what we call dry on wet technique. It almost looks like a drawing when it's finished. It's a bit more of an advanced technique, and I'm still learning how to master it. It's different from the modern rose in that the lines on top are only applied once the base layer is dried. And when you do that, it leaves sort of a three-dimensional effect rather than it all sinking into one flat surface. Start with your outline icing around the edges. Because these are smaller in surface area and have less moisture because the icing is thicker, they dry a bit faster than large areas of icing like flood. You can think of outlines like the walls to hold in the flood icing so it doesn't flow over the sides of the cookie onto the kitchen counter. Now it's time to flood each outlined section. Once the cookie's surface is at least partially dry, you can start to add some of the details using the outline consistency icing. This consistency will sit on top of the cookie so you can really see the lines. I like to start rose designs from the center and then wiggle circular lines outward to look more like petals. I found it looks really impressive to add some lines within each petal, and it seems to give the petals more of a curved appearance. The swirly rose is probably the most fun and freeing to make. I started with a white base and then added darker details, but I think the opposite would also look really pretty, starting with a dark base and then adding white details. This is an easy to intermediate wet on wet technique cookie that you need a bit of confidence with a toothpick to pull off. When you have a large surface area of wet icing, sometimes it's best to let it dry a little bit before starting the next section. So you'll notice I didn't start the leaves just yet. Instead, I started out by adding the red colors into the white section. Don't worry about being too perfect here. You'll have lots of time to work with the icings and swirl them to your liking. If you do swirl it a little bit too much and lose the dimension, you can add a bit more color before it starts to dry. I'm sorry for the camera shake in this video. I'm still learning. Add a line of white onto the green surface while it's still wet. Then add little ticks to represent the leaf veins. Push your toothpick from the bottom straight through the middle of that line to pull it all together. Here's an example of adding a bit more shading into the center of the rose with a darker icing. Use your toothpick to pull and mix the icing around. There you go, 4 different designs using only one cookie cutter shape. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and learned something new. Please leave me a comment below if you have any themes you would like me to try. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and click the bell to be notified so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos. See you next time.